مسافر هرات و زائر خواجه پیر هرات، وقتی که عازم این سفر شدم از حافظ شیرازی یک تقاضایی رو داشتم که یک چیزی دست من بده که بیارم و اینجا به دوستان به عنوان هدیه بدم که پیام ایشون این بود: غبار غم برود و حال خوش شد. انشاءالله که این پیامی که خواجه حافظ شیرازی به ما داد انشاءالله هرچه زودتر بر این منوال سرنوشت و روزگار این مردم مملکت که مردم مملکت عزیز و بزرگی هستند انشاءالله به خیر و خوبی رقم بخورید. نکته بعدی که می‌خواستم شروع کنم به عرضش اینه که این کنفرانس از دید من یونیک هست به قول این فرنگی‌ها به دو دلیل. یکی به دلیل هراته. هرات به نظر من پایگاه تمدنی غیر قابل بدیلی است. بدیلی نداره هرات به لحاظ پایگاه تمدنی و پایگاه تاریخی بودن. و دلیل دومش دوستانی هستن که این کنفرانس رو ارگانایز کردن، کسایی که با امید به آینده تمام ناملایمتی‌های موجود رو بر خودشون هموار میکنن و کوشش بسیار سختی رو برای ساختن آینده زیبایی برای این مردم انجام میدن. این دوستانی هستند که بسیار قابل تقدیرن، قابل سپاسگزاری هستند، کسانی که میتونن کارهای دیگه راحتی رو انجام بدن ولی میان و یک زحمت سنگینی رو بر دوش خودشون میگذارن، درختی رو میکارن که آیندگان از اون بهره‌مند بشن. و چه زیبان این انسان‌ها و هرچی در تاریخ زیبایی وجود داشته از انسان‌هایی بوده که واسه دیگران خوبی خودشون، راحتی خودشون رو فدا کردن. من به عنوان یک دانشجوی دهه 70 میلادی در امریکا، اون زمان به یاد دارم، حالا آقای دکتر سپندا و دوستان دیگر که اون زمان دانشجو بودن میدونن که سوال اصلی جوامع ما سوال توسعه بود که چرا ما توسعه نداریم، علت این که ما توسعه نداریم چیه؟ متاسفانه زمان گذشت و بر ما سخت‌تر شد سوال. به جای اینکه سوال آسان‌تر بشه سوال سخت‌تر شد. سوال امروز ما سوال امنیته. چرا امنیت نداریم؟ ما دیروز امنیت داشتیم ولی به قول مولوی هم طبق و هم طعام ما رو به غارت می‌بردن. امروز نه تنها طبق و طعام ما رو به غارت می‌برن بلکه آرامش شب و روز ما رو هم به یغما و به غارت می‌برن. و من دوست دارم این پنل و دوستانی که در خدمتشون هستیم بریم به سمت این که بحث دولت رو با امنیت بیشتر گره بزنیم و اگر در پایان این جلسه ما توانایی این رو داشتیم که با قانونی بودن موضوع امنیت و چگونگی نسبت بین دولت سازی و امنیت سخنانی رو داشته باشیم، به نظر من نتیجه خوب و زیبایی خواهیم داشت. در پنلی که این ساعت قرار در خدمت شما باشه 4 تا از بزرگان در خدمتشون هستیم که به قول این فرنگی ها it is an honor for me to be a moderator on this distinguished colleagues. من با کسب اجازه اول خانم زکیه عادلی رو معرفی میکنم چون میگن لیدیز فرست، کار دیگه هم نمیشه. ایشون عضو دانشگاه کابل هستم در افغانستان و پروفسور علوم سیاسی. بسیار خوشوقت هستیم که در خدمت شما هستیم. و بعد اگر اجازه بدیم از دست راستم یک کسی رو معرفی کردم، حالا از دست چپم یک نفر رو معرفی کنم. میجر جنرال نارایانان، اگر بیاید مناسب که ایشون Distinguished Fellow of United Service Institution of India هستن و برای من بسیار مایه افتخار هستش که در خدمت ایشون هستم. و مجددا سمت راست من آقای دکتر استیسی هستن که من بسیار خوشحال هستم که در خدمت ایشون هستیم. I'm so pleased to be with you in this panel and hope for a very fruitful discussion. و در پایان جناب آقای دکتر ناصر اندیشه رو خدمتشون هستیم که ایشون دوزیست هستن به قول ما ایرانی ها، هم دیپلمات هستن و هم اسکولار هستن. کار بسیار مشکلی اما ایشون تونستن هر دو رو با هم دیگه داشته باشن و باید بهشون تبریک گفت که معاون وزارت خارجه افغانستان هستن. من بسیار خوشحال هستم که در خدمت شما هستم. اولین سخنران رو با توجه به اینکه اوردری که به من داده بودن یه مقداری با درخواست دوستان تغییری درش داده شده، من از خانم دکتر زکیه میخوام که اگر چون ایشون حتما باید اول باشن و اشتباه هم شده در نوشتن، حتما باید ایشون رو اول نوشتن، من از ایشون درخواست میکنم که شروع کنم. ولی به خاطر اینکه شماها پنلیست ها همتون بدونین من نه اون قدرت پنلیست رو اون مدریتور قبلی رو دارم. I'm not as tough as she was. She was so tough and I cannot even match her in any sense. Therefore, you better to deal with me. No? Just try to end your talk on roughly about 10 minutes or 10 to 12 minutes. But if you go further than that, I cannot really cut your talk at all. Okay. خانم زکی من در خدمت شما هستم و دوستان شروع بفرمایید.
عرض سلام و احترام خدمت همه مهمانای بزرگوار. جا داره که تشکر بکنم از انستیتوت مطالعات استراتژیک به خاطر از اینکه فرصت برای ما فراهم ساختن. بحث ما به ارتباط تأثیر سازمان‌ها و رژیم‌های بین‌المللی بر دولت‌های ملی هست. در شرایط فعلی در قرن 21 حداقل چند فاکتور بسیار تاثیرگذار است بر عملکرد و چگونگی دولت‌های ملی. بحث مهمش جهانی شدن در ابعاد مختلف سیاسی، اقتصادی، فرهنگی و دیگر مسائل یک فاکتور است. وجود بازیگران غیر دولتی، گسترش روزافزون تکنولوژی، ارتباطات، وجود سازمان‌ها و رژیم‌های بین‌المللی، اینها عواملی هست که امروزه بسیار عملکرد دولت‌ها را به نوع متأثر ساخته. در اینکه آیا این فاکتورها پیامد مثبت بر عملکرد دولت‌ها داره یا منفی، دو تا دیدگاه موافق و مخالف وجود داره. دیدگاه اول کسایی مثل نیکلاس بیلی، مثل منچستر، مثل دیکنز، اینها یک رابطه دوسویه بین بحث جهانی شدن و همچنان دولت‌های ملی می‌بینن، یک رابطه تعاملی و تکاملی که هر کدام میتونن باعث تقویت یکدیگر شوند. و در مقابلش دیدگاه دومی که معتقد هستند در واقع جهانی شدن و یا بعضی فاکتورهایی که پیشتر ما نام گرفتیم میتونه باعث تضعیف دولت ملی شود. کسایی مثل آلن تورن، مثل هابرماس و بخصوص در حوزه اقتصادی هابرماس معتقد است که جهانی شدن بر تأثیر منفی که بالای دولت‌های ملی داره باعث میشه منابع مالی دولت‌های ملی کوچک شود. وقتی که منابع مالی کوچک میشه طبیعتاً سیاست‌های اجتماعی سیاسی که دولت‌ها به واسطه منابع مالی پیش میبرن، این را هم تضعیف میسازه و این را هم متأثر میسازه. اگر ما 3 مؤلفه مهمی که در دولت ملی است در نظر داشته باشیم، مؤلفه کارایی، استقلال و اقتدار. کارایی به معنای توانایی دولت‌ها برای پاسخگویی به نیازمندی‌های جامعه خود. امروز بسیار متأثر شده. در گذشته به دلیل اینکه ساده بود روابط و آگاهی عامه هم وجود نداشت، رشد تکنولوژی رو نداشتیم، میزان پاسخگویی دولت‌ها به جامعه تا حد زیادی میتونیم بگیم خوب بود، ولی امروزه نظر به پیچیده‌تر شدن و لایه‌لایه شدن و حتی افزایش افکار عامه و دیگر مسائلی که وجود داره، میزان پاسخگویی دولت‌ها به نیازمندی‌های جامعه تا حدی کاهش پیدا کرد. در اینجا دولت‌ها کوشش می‌کنند با سهیم کردن سایر سازمان‌های بین‌المللی در قدرت تا حدی از اقتدار خود کاهش بدن، ولی بر میزان کارایی خود بیفزایند به خاطر از اینکه بتونن پاسخگو باشند به ضرورت‌های جامعه خود. مؤلفه دوم استقلال هم تا حد زیادی استقلال سیاسی به چالش کشیده شده است و از این نظر دولت‌ها دچار مشکل هستند و بحث اقتدار هم اگر به عنوان قدرت عالیه ما در نظر بگیریم، از میزان اقتدار دولت‌ها هم کاسته شده نظر به همون فاکتورها و عواملی که وجود دارد. یکی از مسائل مهمی که دولت‌ها را تحت تاثیر قرار داده وجود سازمان‌های بین‌المللی و رژیم‌های بین‌المللی است. مهمترین سازمان‌های بین‌المللی سازمان‌های اقتصادی را اگر در نظر بگیریم، سازمان تجارت جهانی، صندوق بین‌المللی پول، بانک جهانی و همچنان سازمان‌های دیگه‌ای که در قسمت صحی کار می‌کنند، سازمان بین‌المللی کار، به نوعی هم باعث تاثیرات مثبت و هم تاثیرات منفی شده که باز در ادامه خدمتتان عرض می‌کنیم. و رژیم‌های بین‌المللی به معنای الگوهای رویه‌ای که نحوه رفتار دولت‌ها را مشخص می‌کنه، اینها هم تاثیرگذار بر چگونگی دولت‌های ملی هستند. رژیم‌های بین‌المللی اقتصادی، رژیم بین‌المللی حقوق بشر و سایر رژیم‌هایی که در موضوعات خاص وجود دارند. به این ارتباط 2 تا دیدگاه وجود داره، یک دیدگاه ریالیست ها و دیدگاه دیگه دیدگاه لیبرالیست ها. اگرچه ریالیست ها به اهمیت سازمان ها و رژیم های بین المللی باور کمتری دارن، چون اونها بر بازیگری اصلی دولت ها بیشتر تاکید دارن، به این معنا که اگر سازمان ها و رژیم های بین المللی هم وجود داره، بازی خاص دولت هاست که چگونگی آنها را مشخص می سازن. برعکس لیبرال ها، چون جناب دکتر شاید فرمودن که با توجه به مسئله امنیت در اینجا بسیار نقش دیدگاه لیبرال ها برجسته هست، به خاطر از اینکه اونها معتقدن وجود نهادها و رژیم های بین المللی تا حد زیادی میتونه میزان همکاری دولت ها با یکدیگر افزایش بده و این افزایش همکاری تا حد زیادی از وضعیت آنارشیک و عدم وجود اقتدار مرکزی کاهش میده. خود از این خود به خود میتونه وضعیت امنیتی را هم بهبود ببخشد، چون وقتی در یک وابستگی متقابل اقتصادی، فرهنگی و دیگر حوزه ها دولت ها به یکدیگر وابسته باشند، طبیعتاً از میزان جنگ و خشونت بین دولت ها هم تا حد زیادی کاسته خواهد شد. و در مورد تأثیرات رژیم های بین المللی و سازمان های بین المللی، در واقع باید منصفانه اگر ببینیم هم تأثیرات مثبت داره و هم تأثیرات منفی. مثلا وجود رژیم ها و سازمان ها حداقل کاری که میکنه یک رویه واحد برای نحوه رفتار دولت ها را مشخص میسازه. یعنی قواعد موجودی که در حقوق بین الملل هست و یا سازمان هایی که با وجود میآید، با ایجاد هنجارها، رویه ها و قواعد باعث میشن که دولت ها رفتار خود مطابق از اونها عیار بسازه و این مسئله دولت ها را در همکاری هرچه بیشتر و به تبع ایجاد امنیت و صلح و جلوگیری از خشونت تا حد زیادی میتونه کمک بکنه و همچنان باعث توسعه همکاری های بیشتر، نظر به اینکه در عصر جهانی شدن ما قرار دادیم و هیچ کشوری نمیتونه به تنهایی ضرورت های خود مرفوع بسازه. و از تأثیرات منفیش اگر بگوییم، طبیعتاً باعث محدودیت حاکمیت ها و اقتدار دولت ها میشن. اگر ما بخوایم جمع‌بندی بکنم نظر به ذیق وقت هم که هست، حداقل در سه بخش ما با محدودیت حاکمیت دولت ها مواجه هستیم. در بخش قانونگذاری، بخش اجرایی و بخش قضایی. در بخش قانونگذاری دولت ها دچار یک نوع دوگانگی یا تبعیت از قوانین و حقوق بین المللی برای تدوین قوانین داخلی خود میشن. در حوزه اجرایی هم ایجاد دوگانگی هایی که در ساختارهای داخلی به وجود میاد یک کم ذره دولت ها را دچار سردرگمی خواهند کرد و در حوزه قضایی هم طبیعتاً با دوگانگی که در ساختارهای قضایی هست این چالش برای دولت ها وجود داره که در تصمیم گیری های قضایی در تطبیق با کدام قانون آیا حقوق و قوانین بین المللی باید فیصله بکنن یا با قوانین داخلی. تشکر از توجه شما.
سرکار خانم دکتر زکیه که هم سخنرانی بسیار غنی رو ارائه دادن و هم وقت خودشون رو یه مقداری کمتر استفاده کردن. بسیار از شما سپاسگزارم و در نوبت بعد من میخوام از دوست عزیزمون از هند درخواست کنم که فرمایش خودشون رو ایراد بفرمایند.
Respected Chair, fellow panelists, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I'd like to thank Dr. Dawood Moradian for giving me this option and the chance to address this august gathering. I'll break up the topic into 4 parts and give you a military scholar's view from other side of the fence of the way I see the world today. Is the world in transition? A brief about the nation-state concept. We heard some speakers today morning. Then how does the global, what exactly do we imply by global interdependence? And how does it impact the nation-state? And where are we today? And try to give some model for the future. Because to my reading, by the end of this century, the nation-state by itself, especially the third world and the developing countries, will find it extremely difficult to survive, economically and as for security, and we are seeing it today. So when we say the world is in transition, what exactly is this transition? The unipolar world under USA is in a state of flux. US is in strategic retreat. The EU, which was looking at the economy along with the USA, has an economic slowdown, and there is an internal dissonance within the EU itself. Within this, you have a rising revanchist China, which feels that it's cheap. The Chinese word, the closest I could get to, is the strategic construct of comprehensive national power. That's how the Chinese see as it is power. Not power is not the economy and the military. It's a comprehensive national power encompassing every aspect of governance. That the chi is flowing in their favor and they can move into this vacuum, especially in Asia. But the strategic window that they have is small, and so you see them sometimes being aggressive. And in this cauldron, throw in the other middle powers and the rising powers who feel that they can also create some strategic space within this vacuum. Where does this leave the weaker and the smaller countries? By economy or by security? Because what you see as per the trend, when you read the tea leaves and do some crystal gazing, is again back to the pre-Second World War multipolar world. And what did the multipolar world give you? A balance of power and centuries of warfare. Do we want that? Because the global north, it's economically not viable for them to go to war. Maybe the middle power and rising power may also look at it the same way. The people who will suffer are the third world, the global south. Because that is where the proxies will fight, and we are seeing it today. the reason why they would not go to war amongst themselves, the global north, is because of the interdependence that exists. And this is going to lead to geo-economic coercion and geopolitical coercion by way of kinetic and non-kinetic means of regime change. And that affects, because it creates chaos and imbalance in those countries. And geo-economic coercion leaves such countries to penury. Now, what exactly is the concept when we say nation state? Very correctly stated earlier by one of the speakers, the nation and state are two entities, separate and distinct. We used to have sovereign states, but a nation deals with cultural and ethnic compatibility. So it's not necessary that you're all from same ethnicity, it's a cultural and ethnic compatibility. And a state has a political and a geopolitical entity. These are two distinct things. So when you look at a nation state, it implies that it has a defined territory, a permanent population, a government, and it has a capacity to enter into relations with other states. And when we talk of sovereignty, the classic definition of sovereignty is full right and power of a governing body over itself without outside interference. It must have its full autonomy to take its own decisions in its own, in the current state, own national interests. How many countries are able to do it today? UN has 193. Are all 193 able to do that today? The answer is a big no. Because of globalization, the global interdependence. What do I mean by interdependence? It means that a change in one will cause a predictable change in the other. So if it affects both countries in a like manner, it is termed as a positive covariance of rewards. But if its effects are diametrically opposite, it's a negative covariance of rewards. And it's so obvious that when a global north, a country from global north, does any deal with a country from global south, it's unlikely to be a win-win situation for both. Now, this impacts directly on what we understand as the term sovereignty. Where does the UN stand today? It's a better version of the League of Nations. But the problem is the principle of harmony of interests. It works on the principle of harmony of interests. But then, if every nation is going to be equal, should P5 have special powers? So thereafter, it devolves into the harmony of interests of P5. If it is in the national interests of the P5 for a country to have a particular deal, it goes through. It does not cover the economic part, mostly, because most of the economic issues are being dealt bilaterally. And this is the major issue today, which is facing us stark in the face. Look at the complete belt starting from this country and going on right up to Syria. It's in turmoil. There are smaller states which are facing debt trap, like Sri Lanka, Myanmar. Most of these countries are economically weak. You cannot stand up to the global north. This is the problem that we face today. That to have a balance of power supplemented by a balance of economic power which is going on. And the states who suffer are the global south. So where do we stand and how do we give the future generations a better and a stable future? Looking back at the federal principles that had come since ancient times, when I look at my own country's history, in the good old days there was the principle of a Chakravarti, which was a very federal sort of a principle. You paid some tribute to him, and thereafter he never interfered in your internal doings as long as it doesn't impact the other kingdoms. So the kings were free to rule by themselves, but it didn't last long, because there is the famous adage in English, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. The federative principle, I felt, was a bit ahead of its time. It didn't work. Confederative principle is what is the principle on which the UN works, and you have a problem there too. So when you look at one of the famous thinkers, political thinkers, Hans Morgenthau, who was the apostle of realism, he placed little hope in such devices to maintain peace and propounded a world community leading to a world state. You just can't jump from a sovereign state to a nation state and jump straight to a world community, because the concept of nationality, identity and sovereignty is very deeply etched in our psyche. It's very deeply etched. But one thing we should not forget, since millennia, the societies have progressed by surrendering certain amount of sovereignty for the larger good of the society. You move from families to clans to tribes to principalities and city-states to kingdoms and empires and to the present-day nation-state. At every level, entities who were within that had to surrender certain amount of sovereignty for the larger good of the society. And my case is, we need to step back and look beyond this concept in future for the nation state. Maybe a regional federal structure where only certain elements of governance, especially for economy, commerce, diplomacy, security, is surrendered to that entity, and all other elements are looked after by respective individual states. And no external power should be permitted to do any deal, whether commercial or otherwise, other than from this federation, not bilateral. United you stand, divided you fall. That is what I feel that you may have to look at. Otherwise, we may have more and more spread of balance of power and balance of economic power, disrupting the lives of people over this complete world, not only over this world island, which is the Eurasia and the African landmass, but also within the Americas. What kind of a future are we leaving for our children and grandchildren? Thank you.
Thanks very much for the rich and thoughtful presentation we received. And if I correctly understand, you talk about power transition at the international level, but at the same time, maybe later on you can give us some comment on a structural transition, which we also later on, I said. Maybe you can give us some comment on structural transition, which we also see at the international level. You talk about the rising Asia. Asia has any positive or negative effects on the security of South Asia, including Afghanistan. I think that is also a very useful point. The last but not least, you talk about the nature of nation state and also the nature of international society. The interconnection between these two is also very crucial one. And if you can give us some thought on that, it's also a very critical point which we may have, because it is really essential to know, is a linear connection between development in the state system and at the larger level, international community. And if there is a linkage, what is the linkage? This is very crucial. Okay, I would like to give floor to our friend Jeffrey Stacey. No, you, because you coming from a superpower country, and we've been so maybe unpolite to give you floor after two. And it is maybe unfortunate that you have a moderator from Iran. I like you to give your presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, my Iranian friend, our esteemed moderator, just deprived me of the joke I was going to use to start off. By going last, I would have to be the shortest with all the relevant points having been already made, but now you get to make that joke, my friend. And the burden on you, keeping them from lunch, now I pass to you as well. But it's great to be back in Afghanistan, a place that I first came a few years ago when I worked for the State Department. I no longer do. I do not represent the U.S. government, nor do I wish to. I'm no longer a scholar either. So I'm just a regular businessman and technical consultant, which leads me to perhaps mention my business partner at Geopolicity. A number of you, I think, know Peter Middlebrook. Peter has been working even longer than I have in Afghanistan and with Afghans. The company has been doing so for nearly 20 years. We do a variety of projects. We continue to do them. We've got others coming up, everything from value chain work in agriculture to public-private partnership work to public financial management. We've worked on the Interior Ministry, public administration reform, civil service reform. In a few weeks, I'll be assisting the Foreign Ministry with the RECA Conference, Regional Economic Cooperation, which will be in Ashgabat this year in a few weeks' time. And really, even though we're a for-profit development company, the profit margin in this space, as many of you know, is not very significant. So you really have to be committed to the work that you're doing. And the work that we do, when we do it well, there's a good thing about this. In a way, everybody wins. The local population wins. The government officials that we're working with perhaps are moving in a more reformist direction. And all the countries that are represented here, and all the countries that believe they have interests in Afghanistan, this may be a controversial statement, but they're also beneficiaries of this kind of good work. But in my talk today, I'd like to do two parts. I'd like to do one on the topic of the panel, on nation states and whether or not they're going to survive, and then talk about Afghanistan a little bit and use it as a kind of case study, if I may. To begin with, and when I look out at you, I really look out and see a kind of team for Afghanistan, or kind of a network for Afghanistan. A number of you that I've already met have been working here for years. If you aren't Afghan, and if you are, I believe that the future will be challenging, but that there are some positive things, and I'll get to that in the second part of my talk. The post-1648 world, when the Treaty of Westphalia kicked off nation-state formation in global history, was a very, very long time ago. but it's going out on perhaps just a little limb to say that I think the world is now more unstable today than it has been at any time since the height of the state formation system in the late 18th and 19th centuries. What isn't threatening the nation state these days? We've got quite a list: warfare, terrorism, geopolitics, globalization, cyber threats, climate change, a subset of those, extreme weather events, refugee flows, population growth, secessionist movements, pandemics, and then my favorite two, and I'll say a little more about these, nationalism/populism, and then the lack of democratic legitimacy. If the great game is on again in Afghanistan, there's a new game happening in the West, and it's also a negative one. As you all are aware, there's a wave of right-wing nationalism that has engulfed North America and Europe in the past 2 years. This is caused by severe economic dislocation of the working class, stemming from competition from integrated trade and financial markets and even ideational markets, as well as, to a lesser degree, to be honest, some racially discriminatory views of portions of these populations. And in a more ultimate causal sense, another factor here to focus on is the crisis in leadership in the West. And we can use, for example, the European Union as a good example of this. In my own view, the European Union is the grandest political experiment in world history. No nation states, especially some of the oldest and some of the most developed, have willingly given up sovereignty at this level and at this rate in global history. The EU gets a bad rap in the media these days. It's going through a hell of a couple of years. But it will survive, just like the nation state will survive. The question is, will they thrive? But the leaders in the European Union, and this goes all the way back to some of its most important leaders, somebody like François Mitterrand or Helmut Kohl, fell down on the job all the way to the present-day leaders of the EU, time and time again, by failing to talk to their citizens. Talk to their citizens about what was at stake in this progressive transfer of sovereignty. What are the benefits? How have their lives actually been improved? How progressively might other improvements take place? Other problems be addressed? This catastrophic failure has caused part of this wave of populism. And as we've already heard mentioned, the vote to leave the European Union by the UK, otherwise known as Brexit, the election of President Trump, the rise into the German parliament by the AfD right-wing nationalist party in Germany are all, well, at least these are the three biggest, most consequential examples of this rise of nationalism of late. And in the US, as we've already heard, things are rather upside down politically. You might say that we're all the way through the looking glass, and if someone asked me to explain this president, I'd tell you I can't do it any better than you can. You're looking at the same television reports, reading the same articles, and perhaps reading the same tweets that I am. And I can't say much more than that, although I'll talk specifically about several administration policies when I talk about Afghanistan in another minute. What I will say is that nation states are going to survive. They're going to do so rather imperfectly. They're going to be fairly resilient in existence terms, but the question is, and this is probably the question for another panel or another conference, will they thrive? That's an entirely different question. There's no end of history, as we've already heard, nor is there any class of civilizations. And there's evidence all over the place that neither of these things have been attained in evidential terms in the world. And let me just conclude by saying a few things about Afghanistan. A little list of some of the good things that are happening and some of the bad things that are happening. On the good side, we have the increased and sustained strength of the national security departments and institutions, including the National Security Council. We have increased training of the Afghan National Security Forces and, to a degree, increased effectiveness. We've got very high-quality special forces, and particularly the leadership, and that extends to a very significant portion of the military leadership of Afghanistan today. We have India's commitment to Afghanistan that has increased quite a bit significantly just in recent terms, and of course we have President Trump's recommitment to Afghanistan that was just announced in the last couple of weeks. This is particularly positive because, as already some of you have been describing in the discussions last night and today at this conference, there's a new kind of momentum related to Afghanistan that is in the air. This is probably the principal reason why. And as we've already heard, this is controversial, whether it's a good thing at all, whether it will succeed or won't succeed. But it's already doing this. With the increased troop strength and military equipment that are already in motion, we'll also have an expectation of a renewed and a larger commitment of foreign aid and diplomatic engagement. Afghanistan, the government, has a challenge before it to make a request of the Trump administration. What should this additional aid consist of? How should it be allotted? What should it cover? All these sorts of things. This will have a positive effect. And of course, there's a change in the rules of engagement for American troops and even some NATO troops. We have to expect increased pressure on the Taliban. We should expect even some unification with Daesh or ISIS. This time around, there's not going to be any announced departure of U.S. forces like there was last time. And finally, there really is a potential now for a national dialogue to take place. President Ghani and ministers have a real opportunity to engage Afghans in a new dialogue in preparation for a dialogue with the Taliban. And there is, not to be Pollyannish about this, but there is a new kind of potential for achieving some balance, in a broad sense, in Afghanistan. Now, some of the bad things, and I'll just wrap up, are obvious to all of us. The increased strength of the Taliban in the meantime, their control of the opium, the increased attrition rate of the ANSF, the increased civilian casualties, this ring of very destructive bombings, and the fact that the great game is on again in terms of Russia, Pakistan, Iran, and of course the US. It's not the UK this time that's competing, it's the US, but the great game is on. All of this over time degrades the legitimacy and the effectiveness of this government. And might I just give one example of where we can find some improvement to conclude. The Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA, is now under threat by President Trump. Not the other allies, not the Iranians, and really no one else in the world at present, including the UN. This actually will also have a negative effect on Afghanistan. For example, now that India has engaged Afghanistan in a very serious way, and we can only expect that to improve, where will India and Afghanistan do their training? They will do it through Iran, through the port of Chabahar. And this is something that the Trump administration will have to get to grips with. How can it denigrate this deal, degrade it, undermine it, if they won't actually withdraw from it, and expect to achieve some success with the U.S. government's own renewed commitment to Afghanistan? These contradictions are everywhere. I myself have published a string of articles in support of the Iran nuclear deal and the additional potential cooperation that lay in the hearts of this deal. To undermine it is against the interests of all these countries, everyone represented here, Iran, and the U.S., and Afghanistan as well. Finally, with all that lays before us, we're going to need a lot of extra energy, hard work, understanding, and as I agreed with my friend, the ambassador from Iran, a consistent identification of common interests and their pursuit together. Thank you.
Jeff, I need to thank you for the creative presentation, thoughtful. Maybe one or 2 points which need some elaboration in my understanding. You touch at the end of your talk on a point which is so crucial. How cooperation between regional and international players could bring stability and prosperity in this country. And any unilateral approach by any of these countries should also be noted as a harmful device. Therefore, I would like you to maybe give us some more elaboration on Trump's new policy. Is it a unilateral approach to Afghanistan, excluding some of the regional players? If it is so, it will be harmful, in my understanding, because you put it in a positive package, the Trump policy. And if you look at the Trump policy in other ways, the way which can be viewed as a negative, because you put a JCPOA and Trump policy, and that would be so nice if you give us some maybe comment on how the drafting and the tailoring of those policies could be harmful or helpful to the future of Afghanistan. The last, but not the least, would be Dr. اندیشه and آقای دکتر ناصر اندیشه که معاون وزارت خارجه هستن به عنوان آخرین سخنران ما صحبت خودشون رو ایراد خواهند کرد. بفرمایید.
ما در ابتدا میخوایم همون اعلان تجارتی رو به اصطلاح که در هر جلسه مربوط این اینستیتوت می داشته باشم باز تکرار کنیم که ما اینجا از موقف وزارت امور خارجه از موقف رسمی صحبت ندارم و فقط رئیس یک شهروند افغانستان نگرانی‌هایی رو که دارم میخوایم شریک بشیم. و آغاز سخن خودم همراه یک شعری که امروز خوانده شد میکنم و در آخر اگر وقت من به حضور ترجمه میکنم به انگلیسی و اویی است که آن شی موزون جهان عاشق موزون طلبد. آن شی موزون جهان عاشق موزون طلبد، شد رخ من سکه زر تا که به میزان برسد. سوال اساسی بحث ما که اگر دور نریم این بود که آیا دولت ملت در قرن 21 بقا خواهد کرد یا نه. اگر ما سروی دولت ملت های بزرگتر و قویتر را بگیریم فکر میکنم که ارقام و اعداد برای ما نشان میدن که بله دولت های بزرگ، دولت های قوی امکان ازی که در قرن 21 بقا کنن و پیش برن و دیگه هم تقویت بیافن وجود داره. ما فقط مثالش انتخابات هایی میگیم که ما میتونیم به دو طرف از این بالانس به اصطلاح حساب کنیم. انتخاباتی که در آمریکا شد، در هند، فیلیپین و هنگری یک گروپی از پاپولیست ها و نشنالیست ها را سر قدرت آورد. ولی در این زمان در امی یکی دو سال اخیر انتخابات هایی که در فرانسه، جرمنی و ایران شد نشان داد که نه، ما میتونیم که دوباره مردم رای بدن برای کسایی که دیدگاه آزادتر و دیدگاه به اصطلاح لیبرالتر دارن. با این اساس در قسمت دولت‌های بزرگ به اصطلاح انگلیسی the jury is still out. ولی تمرکز صحبت ما زیادتر بالای دولت‌ها با نهادهای ضعیف خواهد بود. دولت‌هایی که در او شگافت‌ها بسیار گسترده است، شگاف‌های قومی و زبانی و مشکلات امنیتی و این دولت‌ها مخصوصاً در روند دولت سازی دولت‌هایی هستند که برایشان بعد از موج سیوم دموکراسی که در دهه‌های 80 اخر 80 90 به وجود آمده و حتی اگر گفته میتونست موج چهارم که متاسفانه نشد بعد از بهار عربی به وجود آمدن، امی دولت‌ها هستند. آیا امی دولت‌ها، سوال من اینه است و من ذاتا سوال دارم تا جواب که آیا این دولت‌ها، آیا این حکومت‌ها میتونن در قرن 21 بقا کنند؟ خب چون پروژه دولت سازی مدرن، خصوصا دولت سازی همین 50 سال گذشته و خصوصا اوایل قرن حاضر زیادتر با پروژه دموکراسی گرفت و ما را میرسانه به این که آیا اگر بحث دموکراسی و دموکراتیزه شدن بتونه به مسیری که لااقل بعد از جنگ دوم جهانی در بعضی کشورها تانست رهگشا باشه، بر متواکی باشه، فکر میکنم که جواب مثبت است و ما میتونیم که شاهد تقویت دولت ملت ها باشیم. خب اگر فرضاً این را مثال کنیم در قرن 21 لااقل دو دولت دیگه هم زیاد شده، کاساوو و سودان جنوبی، پس به این اساس میگیم که هنوز هم فضا برای زایش دولت ملت ها وجود داره. ولی سوال اساسی است که قسم دکتر اسفندان گفتن که پروژه دموکراسی سازی را باید به می ترتیب کس پیش ببریم یا بالایش یک تجدید نظر صورت و چالنجی را که آقای جنرال راجیو دادنی بود که جدا که دولت‌های ضعیف در معرض اضمحلال قرار خواهد داشت در آغاز این. I have also a few words quickly in English, and that is that the reason, as I said, for this, since the end of the Cold War and violence in mostly in the former Soviet republics, Balkans, and places like Sudan, Colombia, Syria, and Iraq, and partly in Afghanistan right now, which I think threatens the existence of the state. But then there are a number of attributes. So few, as previous panel also focused on it, the few will give a primordialist account of this conflict. They will say, like, you know, it's just, that is the account, it's ethnic tensions, the tensions between different ethnicities living, you know, in a geographical boundary. But the other scholars focus on exogenous factors such as modernization and economic and political competition, sometimes inclusion and sometimes exclusion. And as a result of this serious tension between supposedly liberal notion that underlies the perception of modernity and the clearly illiberal impetus of national institutions to exclude some people are the main causes of this conflict. So, according to this account, then the conflict in multi-ethnic and weak states is the result of three main ingredients which will threaten this. Fear of domination. Second, an institutional incentive that encourages extremism. And third, the myth that privileges social groups over each other. So the main factor which prevents, according to this view, it's not mine, just collected, which prevents state building and even threatens the state building and modernization in such society is the tension between this informal rules or norms and formal institutions. So you have rules, we have norms and we have rules, and the tension between these two inhibits, prevents state building. Most of studies puts the onus directly or in large way on formal institutions such as electoral system, rules governing the electoral districts, and formation of multi-ethnic relations. But then some others will say that it's the problem of the zero-sum game in the majoritarian democracy. Because what majoritarian democracy does is by it attempts to force groups to focus on cross-category cleavages, such as class, like economic well-being, education opportunities, etc., and fail to appreciate the sticky character of identity, especially ethnic. And that leads to outbidding by more extremist parties as opposed to incumbent government. And the groups who are excluded, they look at concession by their leaders as betrayal. They will feel that they are betrayed, and then this process itself will bring more and more of extremist groups who can outbid the rival parties in the system itself. Because of this tension between the rules and the norm, because if you disobey a rule, then there is clear ramification. But when the norm is broken, it's opaque. It's opacity surrounding the consequence. So it's a norm, somebody has broken it, so you don't have anything clear. So in this view, it says that in states like the post-conflict states, the rule of democracy will not be built on the foundation of certainty. So if you look for certainty, then democracy is not the answer. Because democracy is all about institutional uncertainty. At least I think in Britain that's the case. Because we don't know until the ballots are counted. We don't know the results. So that is, that's uncertainty. And that's why this institution itself, the way that we know it, is at odds with the norms of group borrowing. So uncertainty can never be eliminated in a democratic procedure. So the question again, which I'm basically putting here on the floor because I couldn't find the answer myself, maybe in Q&A we can find it, that how we are going to address this, and do we need, as Dr. Smanka said, that we have to look into this whole project of democratization from a different lens. So if I could conclude with that and get back to the point that I mentioned there, and that is basically what I believe is that should be the way forward, and that's moderation. The translation is that my graceful and measured, tuneful love king demands graceful and measured beloved. My face has to turn or has to become yellow, like coin of gold, to become worthy of that level of grace and balance. So our face, as a nation, has to turn yellow like gold. It means we have to take some time until we become worthy of this grace and measured tuning of nation building. But the question of surviving, I think if the state will survive or not, unlike the Persians who are very indirect in their poetry and use a lot of symbols, and in English there's a very famous song which says, yes, I will survive. Until I know how to love and try. Thank you.
آقای دکتر ناصر بسیار صحبت‌های زیبا و تئوریکی داشتیم. من از شما بسیار سپاسگزار هستم. به نظرم شما تخصیصی به قول ما ایرانی ها زدیم. حالا من امیدوارم تخصیص رو شما همینطوری که استفاده بکنیم. اون عنوان کلی رو سوال رو تبدیل کردیم به یه سوال دیگه تحت عنوان دولت‌های ضعیفی که وجود دارن آیا میتونن بقا داشته باشن؟ نه که به نظر من سوال بسیار زیبا و خوبی بود، ولی همونجور که شما partly English, partly Farsi, let me then do the part of English. I think you made also two important interventions. Both of them need more clarification, in my understanding. First, maybe indirectly you touch on how the weak state would actually affect international security. In my understanding, it is nice if we can look at this question from another angle. Is it really negative in international security terms, emergence of weak states by their natures? Because it is assumed that it is a negative phenomenon, but there is also another side of the coin that maybe it is a damping arena within which some of the countries actually exporting some of the threats to some part of the geographically south. Because we need a new definition of south. The definition of the south which we did have in the past was in economic terms. We need a security definition of the south. Because in the past, the definition of the south was mainly concentrated on how the international political economy need a part which we called in the past south. But right now there is a new emerging south in security terms, and we need to actually take a very careful look at that explanation. The other point which I think needs a little bit more elaboration is some type of distinction between stability and security. We need to make distinction because maybe, I don't read that one at all because later on maybe. I think we may come to some type of stability in our region, but it does not mean that we will get security. This is also a very crucial. The last, let's look at the trajectory of a state formation, not the phenomena of a state formation as end result. Because if we look at the trajectory of a state formation, that would give us a new explanation of the whole questions. I go for Q&A and then I will read the notes. Okay, right and then left. Is it okay for all of us? We have two on right and two on left. Please. Microphone or there.
Sorry, I think I'm loud enough.
No, you use microphone. What? Oh, okay, go ahead.
I'm Alok Bansal, Director, India Foundation, New Delhi.
Okay.
The session was on can nation states survive the 21st century? I think one of the biggest threats which the nation states face has not been covered. Because today, the biggest threat to nation states actually emanate from ideologically driven non-state actors like Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, Taliban, which seek to create a global Islamic emirate. Now, why I am telling this is because in the previous session, we had Secretary General of Bagwash talking about negotiations with Taliban. Now, how do you negotiate with somebody which wants to exterminate you? It wants to exterminate the concept of nation state itself. Because very often what is not visualized by the Western scholars is the symbiotic relationship which exists between Al-Qaeda and Taliban. Al-Qaeda has never talked of waging a global jihad under Osama bin Laden or Ayman al-Zawahiri. It's always been under Amirul Mu'minin. So theologically, Al-Qaeda is equally dependent on Taliban. Now, as long as Al-Qaeda is dependent on Taliban, will Al-Qaeda allow Taliban to come to a negotiated settlement? I somehow feel this sort of factor is not taken into cognizance, or we tend to overlook the ideological underpinning of obscurantist terrorist organizations like Taliban.
Excuse me, sir.
How do you visualize this particular threat to nation state emanating from these?
You address any
non-state
specific?
Anyone can answer
Anyone.
because nobody
Okay.
spoke on this.
Okay. And the last, or there, please, microphone. من خانم ندیدم. این خانم حتما جلوتر از اون آقا بوده من ندیدم. ایشون بود. من اصخایی ببخشید. چشمان من زنید.
عرض سلام و احترام دارم خدمت اساتید بزرگوار و حکومت. سوالم از همکار گرامی خانم عادلی هست. شما صحبت کردیم به ارتباط دو دیدگاهی که لیبرالیست ها و ریالیست ها دارن به ارتباط آینده دولت های ملی و یک در حال ایران میکانیکی میگن خود مواد دولت یا ارگانیک میبینن و همچنین از رژیم های بین المللی صحبت کردیم. من دقیق میخوایم نظر شما رو داشته باشیم که بیشتر کدام موافق هستیم با کدام دیدگاه؟ ریالیستا که دولت ها میگن یعنی پایدار هست مثل نهاد خانواده و دیگر نهادهای جامعه میمانه و دوام خواهد کرد، یا نه موافق با دیدگاه لیبرالیست ها هستیم که میگیم تغییر خواهد کرد و یک نهاد مکانیکی هست. و همچنین با اساس عمیق از رژیم های بین المللی صحبت کردیم. شما اینو به عنوان یک متغیر مستقل در نظر میگیریم یا به عنوان یک متغیر متداخل که تاثیر میگذاره ولی در نهایت تاثیرگذاری هزی در حدی نیست که بتونه این قواعد و انجارهای بین المللی دست پای دولت زیاد محدود کنه و بسته کنه؟ به این ارتباط هم میخوایم نظر شما بدیم، چون بر اساس نظریاتی که کلاسنر و رابرت گلیپن اینا نوریالیستا مطرح میکنن، میشه که بگیم بیشتر در حد محدودیت میتونن وضع کنن ولی در نهایت میتونن به عنوان یک ابزار باشن. تشکر میکنم.
بسیار ممنون. این وقت من دوستانی که میخوام صحبت بکنم خیلی اونجوری که خود دستو میکنی من نمیتونم ببینم، چون خانم من میگه تو نمیتونی بشنوی وقتی من حرف میزنم، نمیتونی ببینی من وقتی صحبت میکنم. من عذرخواهی میکنم. بفرمایید شما. میکروفون رو لطف میفرمایید.
Thank you. I would raise my question in English. My question is about, in recent months, we saw a different rise of nationalism in the region, especially the referendum of Kurdistan in Iraq. I would like to ask the panelists, especially Mr. Andisha, what do you think, what would be the consequence of Kurdistan-Iraq referendum on the region, especially on countries of having the background of multi-ethnicity dialogues and also even the backlash? What do you think about it? Do you think it will have consequence on Afghanistan and Pakistan, countries that have the problem of multi-ethnicity and have the problem of...
in drug business went up. 10 years the Americans are supporting them with soldiers and billions of dollars. Now that is the situation. Still, Trump says that he will wage the war, intensify the war. And the drug traffickers and the others, they are in power, they do not want peace. How peace can come? The first thing is peace. If we do not have peace in Afghanistan, how we can have to build a nation state? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's enough right now for the first round, maybe the second. But each of you, please, in 60 or 90 seconds, try to wrap some answer to the question, please. Goes from Dr. Adisha.
For the first question, I think there is a whole session on what you're asking. I think that's we should have touched it a little bit here, but I think that was maybe we ignored that intentionally because the whole session will discuss about ideology and especially extremist ideology and their impact on the nation states. But just as a joke, even the Islamic State claims that it's a state, so it's not a threat to state, so it's a new state. On the second question, so I'll leave it for Dr. Sabadali to address. On the question of Mrs. Farid, I think I don't have the answer. I think that's the jury is out, and as Dr. Sabahadi also touched upon this, that the state which has been built, I mean, you don't have, it's very, very, I don't know, maybe some islands in the Pacific where you can find, a uni-ethnic state. So these states have spread throughout these centuries as an imagined community. mostly. So that's, I think that's how we'll define it. But it's not that this question of ethnic identity, and as I mentioned, primordial approach to identity has been in the ups and downs throughout history. What will be the impact of that on Afghanistan? I don't think it will have any major impact on Afghanistan. It will have mostly impact on the neighboring countries where they share those ethnicities. And the same goes for Catalonia. So how then you can justify that? So there you will say in Kurdistan, because there is a group of people, they want a state for themselves. But in Catalonia, I think is a very modern first world country where they have also one of the greatest football teams, which happened for me to support. But there's a secessionist movement. But also on the question that just one point on Dr. Farouk Hassan, that what you say, Dr. is, I'm just as an academic, it's a very general statement. And as an academics, we don't make general statements. But since 2001, the Americans has empowered traffickers and drug lords. I mean, you can say that some of them, that might have been said, because the people who are sitting here has been empowered since 2001, and I don't have any drug dealing. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff, do you want to go?
There's no question that the United States has made mistakes. We've already heard about some of them today. The terrible bombing of the hospital in Herat, there have been many others. I'll mention one that drives me crazy, which is the training of Afghan military and police forces, especially police forces, has often been done by pulling police officers out of Texas or somewhere, bringing them over here and saying, teach. We don't train the trainers very well, always. And that includes sometimes on the military side. I can mention many other things. No one is without mistakes and errors along the way. The question is, what is the commitment, what is the intention, and overall, as you were pointing out, what is the effectiveness? And there's an opportunity here. There's a momentum shifting back in favor of doing something good for Afghanistan and the international community. This should be taken advantage of. Other donors will follow the lead of the U.S., even if it's Donald Trump. And look at what Pakistan has just done. Trump has given Pakistan a very hard time, I think, not entirely shrewdly, in my view. And they turned around and did something for the U.S. just the other day that got Trump's attention. I mean, that shows that the Pakistanis themselves have not completely given up the idea of doing something better with regard to the Haqqanis and others. Think about the Taliban. Who are the Taliban? Some of them are criminals. Some of them are foreign fighters. Some of them are people who don't have another way to make a living. Some of these will fall away. These are not necessarily ideologically hardcore committed folks like some of the others that I've mentioned. If there's an overall policy here that includes a military approach, a political leadership approach, an economic development approach that puts some of these other people, put some of these Afghan young men into other livelihoods. But most importantly, who is supporting the Taliban globally? Who are the nation states that are doing this? Can they be engaged? Can pressure brought to bear on them, including some of the ones that are not very well known, even in this very, very informed circle. So there's a variety, a multi-pronged approach that is going to be required. It will take a lot of time, it will take a lot of effort, and we have no guarantees of success, but I think there is an opportunity now to try again.
Thank you very much.
دو رهیافت کلان روابط بین الملل بیشتر از اینکه به ارتباط آینده دولت‌های ملی کپ زده باشند در مورد تاثیرگذاری سازمان‌های بین المللی بحث کردند. هر دو دیدگاه دولت محور هستند با این تفاوت که لیبرال‌ها بر نقش بازیگران غیر دولتی هم زیاد بحث می‌کنند. من خودم شخصا با توجه به اینکه مثل لیبرال ها به نکسرشتی انسان های اعتقاد دارم با دیدگاهشون هم زیاد موافق هستم و ضمن ازی که اگر این ما در نظر بگیریم که فعلا روابط دولت ها بیشتر اقتصاد محور شده، یعنی منافع اقتصادی اولویت بر هر مسئله، اگر بحث امنیتی یا نظامی هم هست با همین مؤلفه اقتصادی دیده میشه، پس بنابراین دیدگاه خصوصا نهادگرایان لیبرال میتونه ما را به سمت همکاری‌های بیشتر و کاهش تنش‌ها و منازعات بین المللی سوق بده. در مورد رژیم‌های بین المللی رابطه یکسویه با دولت ندارن که فقط ما فکر کنیم اینها میتونن دولت‌ها را محدود بکنن. در وهله اول دولت‌ها هستند که رژیم‌های بین المللی را ایجاد میکنن و در مرحله بعد رژیم‌های بین المللی رفتار و رویه دولت‌ها را مشخص می‌سازن. بنابراین یک رابطه دو سویه بین رژیم‌های بین المللی و دولت‌ها میتونه وجود داشته باشه.
Kindly just make it as short as possible because I see Dr. Moradia as trying to tell us to finish the whole panel. Please.
There have been no direct questions to what I stated, so I would cover the few points that the chair had asked me to elaborate on. Firstly was what should be the regional structure. The structure would vary from region to region because the geo-economic, geopolitical and geo-strategic compulsions of each region and within the region is going to be different. So it is not one size which fits all. When I say a region, we need not go by the Western construct of the regions that they have given. We as an entity within Asia, within Africa, within America have to decide what this region should constitute. The major issue here being that if you take a region, I would take the example of South Asia. Where is the problem? You have one very big country which has borders with everybody else and the others don't have borders with them. There will always be the glimmer of doubt of what this big country is going to do. So hence, I would propound that minimum 2 rising powers or big powers should be available within that region. You will be able to get some balance. Next issue which comes up is how much time will it take? It won't happen overnight, nor will it happen within the next 100 days or 1,000 days. It takes time because like I said, the concept of sovereignty and nationality is very deeply etched in our psyche. So we have to take lessons from the ASEAN and EU, see where they went wrong, where they went too far, which created problems. And so you have to go in a step-by-step manner. So the initial, like I said, your major issues of economics, commerce, energy, security, environment, diplomacy, these you have to sit down across the table and decide what would be decided by the region. Rest, the balanced nation states would look after themselves. When you try to exceed that limit and go faster is where you will create problems, which is what I feel that the EU has erred in, where they tried to go too far in the geopolitical and geoeconomic spheres, which the other people found a problem. Plus, the issue has always been of economics, because when you have global interdependence, after all the MNCs want profits. So if he's getting profit from somewhere else, jobs get lost in the home country. Next issue was rising Asia. I have a big issue about rising Asia. Is it rising? Is Asia as a whole rising? There are only few entities in Asia which is rising. So if you get again a multipolar world within multipolar Asia, you will have jostling for strategic space within Asia. So what happens to the smaller countries of Asia? So this term rising Asia, I have a major issue with because the whole of Asia is not rising. And lastly was the term which the chair had used as an international society. No, we have multiple societies which function at the international sphere. At the international level, we are neither an international community nor an international society. I don't believe in that. There are multiple societies which have their own compulsions and they come together at the international fora to look at how to compromise and go ahead. And that is where I had said that the smaller and the weaker countries have a problem. Thank you.
من در انتها خیلی عذرخواهی میکنم از دوستانی که سوال داشتن و فرصت پرداختن به سوالاتشون نبود. حتما ما رو میبخشن و حتما این احساس رو دارن که بنده علاقه داشتم که این سوالات مطرح بشه ولی به دلیل وقت محدود نشد. نکته بعدی که میخواستم عرض کنم خدمتتون این هستش که من بسیار خوشوقت هستم که در خدمت شما هستم و این خوشوقتی رو نمیتونم کتمان کنم. در نتیجه در پایان مجددا این خوشحالی خودم رو دوست داشتم ابراز بکنم و امید به این داشته باشم که سال آینده که در خدمت شما هستیم اوضاعی کاملا متفاوت به نفع حال خوش انشاءالله داشته باشیم. همه شما رو به خدا میسپارم و آرزوی نهار بسیار زیبایی برای همگی شما دارم.